Well, we are live. I'm Brigantia Blackbird. Happy Wednesday. This is the Blackbird Grimoire, and today we're talking about becoming a domestic goddess. And my goal and intention with this is to hopefully deconstruct some of the psychological hurdles we have, because I think a lot of the things that get in the way of us having the kind of home life that we want, one that's integrated between our mundane life and our spiritual life. And one thing that just gets in the way is just false expectations, ideas that people have put into our heads that have just said, well, it's impossible, it just can't be done. And the people who say they're doing it on social media, well, it's all just for clicks and views. And you look off into the distance behind the camera and you'll see the actual state of their household, and it's very discouraging. So I want to take some of that discouragement out of the ether, and let's talk about how we can do this. So let us begin, and don't forget to say hello to me in the live chat. I will be looking for your comments on both the YouTube side and on the Rumble side. So let's start with a bit of a pep talk today. There are several things I hear when I bring up the idea of perhaps recultivating a rich and a meaningful home life. And the first thing I have heard many times is, I have one thing that my mother frequently said. Now, mind you, she still managed to keep the house very clean and keep the house very organized. But with all due respect to my mother, always struggling. It was never easy for her. Now, granted, my brother and my father and I aren't the most orderly creatures, and I think her excessive concern about the orderliness of the house brought out our own passive aggressiveness on that issue. But she wasn't able to give the house the kind of soul that she wanted to, just because she was obsessed with having no time. Now, fortunately, there are workarounds. Who's to say that all of your housekeeping has to take place on one day at one set of time, and that's the only way to do it? I mean, nonsense, 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 nonsense. That's not what having a household routine is all about. Another thing I hear is absolutely true. I think there's a great many people who simply were never taught, because maybe a single parent household, or maybe because both parents were working, or maybe because their parents couldn't get over their own psychological hurdles of, I don't feel like it, do I really need to do the laundry, do I really have to cook, all these things. And so it just became this burdensome thing, and so they never taught the kids about what's what. Now, fortunately, we can get past that because we can learn, and there's all kinds of resources to help us with that journey. Another thing I will hear people say is that they feel overwhelmed. I think that the sensation of being overwhelmed is a product of not having the home life you want. It's a product of not having things in a fashion to where it's orderly, to where you can find what you're looking for when you go to look for it, to know that things are going to run smoothly when you need them to. I think that feeds into the sensation of being overwhelmed. So improving the state of your housekeeping is actually going to help alleviate that sensation. The next thing I hear is, I hate that kind of thing. Well, and it's no wonder, because how many different people in our lives have told us that housework is just drudgery, and running a household, that's just horrible and awful, and who would really want to do that? There's so many better things to do. Well, I think with a shift in attitude, it doesn't actually have to be awful. I mean, there's plenty of tasks, no matter what your work in his life, that are very routine, very mundane. They're not, intellectually stimulating, but it still needs to be done. And the fact that that's just as true in the home as in the workplace, it doesn't, take the need for things to get done away. But we can shift, perhaps we're having an excess of an emotional response to it. We can change that. Next thing I hear is that people will judge me. They probably will. There are a lot of people who take kind of a perverse sort of pride towards having, a dirty, disorderly home that isn't really pleasant for anyone, and that everyone just kinds of, they think it's somehow empowering because they have broken the chains of the patriarchy house that's in a disgraceful condition. That's like you've been battling a poltergeist for the better part of 3 months. And so they people who are in that state, who are not keeping their homes up as an act of defiance, they will absolutely judge the people who do. However, you will earn the admiration of other people who do appreciate this sort of thing and see the value of it. Another thing people will say is that, I've never really seen myself this way, domestic goddess, that just doesn't feel like me. Well, that could be very true, but that may just be one season of your life, and all life is evolution. I mean, I'm 42 years old. My life is very different from the time when I was 22, very different from when I was 12 or even 32. And, when I get to be 52, 62, life will be different then. It is okay for us to change and evolve, especially since that we are creating greater comfort within the sphere of our own influence. And certainly our home should be within the sphere of our influence. Another thing people say is, well, what if I fail? As if, if you fail, or that things don't go well, or if it takes you a long time to get your groove, that somehow that invalidates the process. First of all, by eliminating what doesn't work for you, that brings you closer to what will. And you can also start to, is this an issue with my attitude? Is this issue with my time constraints? Did I have a really unrealistic expectation about what kind of standard I could maintain? There's all sorts of different reasons why people might feel like they fail, but success is possible, and you just going through the process can help. Another thing that people say, particularly those with children, is, no one helps me. That was the refrain of my mother. I have great sympathy. I was an absolute swine to her growing up. I actively sabotaged her. However, despite all of that, what she was trying to teach me about the benefits of orderliness, tidiness, that actually did sink in. And once I was an adult, I acknowledged within myself, even though I would have rather died than admitted to her, that I actually do prefer having tidy surroundings. I actually do like having clean surroundings. I want to feel comfortable in my home. And she, at the very least, taught me the mechanics of that. Now, and it may very well be true that any parents listening to this, you may not be able to reform your spouse. I get that. My husband has made great strides since we got married, mostly for the state of my nerves, so I don't have a nervous breakdown. Good man, that. And, you might be in a similar situation with your spouse to where they don't really see what the issue is, and you might be facing open defiance from your children, and that's just part of life. However, what you teach them will have value. It will sink in eventually. And, all the efforts going through that will also help you develop as a person yourself. Keeping house is boring. Well, yeah, I'll acknowledge that. I'm not saying that every time I scrub the bathtub that I feel like this is the most interesting, stimulating thing I could possibly be doing. It's not like that. But the result is that it's a more comfortable life that, when I go back into the bathtub later that evening, I can have my bubble bath, I can read my book, maybe have a glass of wine handy, and I can just shut out the world and I can be comfortable and have a little oasis of peace. So it's really about the results, being more focused on the results of what your housekeeping can accomplish. That can help you push back any sense of boredom. All right. So I do truly believe that civilization and culture absolutely begins at home. How we live in our day-to-day fashions and those habits, especially if those are common habits amongst the people around us, that creates a kind of atmosphere. It creates a way that things are done. This is part of who we are. This is how we are expressing ourselves as a people. And I find a lot of wisdom in this Chinese proverb that I've quoted here. It says, if there is light in the soul, there will be beauty in the person. If there's beauty in the person, there will be harmony in the house. If there's harmony in the house, there will be order in the nation. If there's order in the nation, there will be peace in the world. And I think this absolutely holds true. Because if you have worked on yourself, then you are a more beneficial influence to the people around you, including the manner in which your household is run. And if your household isn't falling apart, not only does that set a better example, but it takes some stress off of a community. And as people go on with their own individual evolution with this, as people gradually get themselves in order, then there's not as much trouble within a particular community. And if that spreads, then there isn't as much trouble within a nation. And it keeps a lot of problems smaller, or at least more manageable, and some it will actively prevent. So I don't think that we should think, oh, well, I'm just this one little grain of sand. It doesn't make much difference what I do. Like, well, okay, maybe you and your household are one grain of sand, but if we encourage this, then other grains of sand join us, and then look, we've got a lovely beach and everything's peaceful. So something about that. Don't underestimate culture. Now, our culture, our country, and the world, it's going through a particularly rough patch, which I know doesn't begin to say it, but nevertheless, it is true. And I think we know that the status quo can't go on, and that many of us feel that there's nothing practical they can do to combat any of the insanity. And that's really one of the things that has also motivated me to want to talk about this process of becoming this domestic goddess, of really placing greater emphasis on home and family and marriages. Because when we get our house in orders, when we are more focused upon the well-being of our mates and of our families and practicing the virtues that we hold sacred as pagans, that is a daily way to reject the madness. Our exact way of life, or the way we even breathe, is saying, you know what, crazy people, I'm not down with you. You are creating a world I want nothing to do with. Now, I'm not powerless against that. I am sowing the seeds for a better life. And because we are sowing seeds that actually have the capability of growing and producing something good, that is what will help us outlast all of the lunatics. So again, it might feel small on a day-to-day basis, but the more people who we can persuade to bring around to this state of mind, the more widespread the influence will be, and the way we can, perhaps make the insane chapter we're going through right now a little less crazy and a little less severe. All right, so another thing I'd like everyone to remember is that William Ross Wallace in his poem did have it correct. The hand that rocks the cradle is the hand that rules the world. When we take responsibility for our homes and for the raising of our children and nurturing our marriages, we as women are wielding a profound degree of power. We are making human beings. We are setting the tone for what is acceptable, what is not acceptable, why. The old saying that if mama ain't happy, ain't nobody happy. That is literally objectively true. I don't care what civilization you are, where you live, what religion is being commonly practiced, what's going on politically. If mama doesn't like it, there's going to be problems, and there will be problems until that is resolved and she is content with the current state of affairs. And I would really call upon people, let's use this power consciously. Let's use it wisely, and let's use this power that we have towards creating a long-term good, a long-term vision of the future. Because there's plenty of people tearing things down, and that's pretty easy. It doesn't require thought. It requires much more strategy and much more strength of character to build something good, but that's exactly what we're doing here. So you have power, you have options, and what you are doing matters when you take on this role. So, as I was saying, the matriarch, the homemaker, the domestic goddess wields an extraordinary degree of influence and power within the sphere of the home. And for reasons that I've already stated, how your husband chooses to deal with you. Well, that very much depends upon what behaviors of his you reward and which ones you either ignore or that you give him a very chilly reception for. That is absolutely setting the tone. It's the same with the children. What lessons are you teaching them? And it's going to have an incredible impact on how their lives turn out. So this is as close to absolute power as any human being is likely to experience. Now, recent decades revealed that many women are going through a crisis of confidence, particularly when it comes to domestic pursuits. And during the pep talk phase of this, we went over some of the sources for why we may not feel totally comfortable with this particular role. But I would like to stress that lack of confidence has been externally imposed upon us. It is artificially constructed, and it has suited the political ends of people like feminists, people like Marxists. And in the case of feminism, that movement, it has long since achieved its legitimate aim, certainly in this country. And it's struggling for relevance and power and money. And one of the ways to keep on, getting money to the organizations and getting money for all these publications and getting women to care what they say is if you create active discontent, if you can convince women that there's something wrong with them, or that there's somehow their natural inclinations of it, I really think I can do the most good if my kids are small, maybe I need to focus on them, or, my husband and I have been going through a rough patch, maybe I need to be more focused on him and helping him through this so that our marriage can survive. If women are thinking about that, they're not thinking about what feminists and other leftist organizations want, and that deprives them of a great deal. So that is something to bear in mind about where these attacks against our confidence are really coming from. And just to be clear, no one has any obligation whatsoever to live their life to serve a cause that is not serving them, particularly when that cause is preventing that person from building a satisfying and fulfilling life. And that's what we see coming from the political left in all of its forms. Destroy the family, destroy marriage, destroy civilization. You need to live for the cause because we said so. It's a terrible state of affairs. No one has any obligation to do that. And if we weren't feeling so vulnerable within ourselves, I don't think that messaging would gain any kind of traction. So, by building ourselves up, all of these ideologies that are actively tearing down our lives on the individual level and on a societal level, they will start to wane. So, it is important that we do this. And I would just also like to say that no woman has to live and make choices to exist in the way that men have traditionally existed in order to have respect and be valued, because that's really been the messaging from leftists and feminists for a very, very long time. Be like a man, think like a man, live like a man, do things like a man. Like, no, I never needed to be a man. It's quite enough for me to be a woman, and I can, in many ways in life, exercise a far greater degree of power and influence than men can by claiming my power as a woman. And be doing that, that doesn't prevent me from fulfilling any other kind of ambitions. Traditional female pursuits, they do not make women lesser or stupid or unambitious in any way, shape, or form. It's just about your priorities, and sometimes, depending upon the season of your life, your priorities will be focused much more on home, and it's right and proper that they should do so. And sometimes caving into what other people want, women do tend to be much more agreeable than men. Like, oh, well, I want people to like me, so I better be agreeable, and I better do what all of these other influences are telling me to do, while not realizing that, no, I actually need to set a boundary. That's not a voice I need to listen to. It's a voice of vanity, and it's a voice of someone trying to push me to do things that they want, rather than asking me, what do I want and what do I need in order to proactively pursue that. Stuff to think about, gang. Stuff to think about. Now, I want to spend a little bit of time on some trends that we've seen lately. In the past couple of years, cottagecore has become this big thing. I didn't know what the word was 5 years ago, and then out of nowhere, somewhere in COVID, suddenly I hear cottagecore and this core and all these other things. And you'll notice that there's been a resurgence of popularity in other traditionally inspired aesthetics and traditional pursuits. And I think that's proof that many people are desiring a more comfortable home life. This whole business of, I'm wearing these girly clothes and I baked bread and look at me tend my garden and I want to make my house more cozy and comfortable. That's all saying I want my domestic sphere to be better, and people are trying to do that and justify it to them through their pursuit of aesthetics, because again, there's psychological hurdles from saying, yeah, I just want this because I'm female. I just want this because I'm a human being. I just want this because I think a prerequisite for having a good life is having a good home life. And along with all of this, there's a resurgence and interest in actual romance, meaningful relationships, and the family life that can result from such. And it's not all coming from Christian conservatives or anything like that. A lot of people are feeling that push that is not really motivated by any kind of spiritual impulse. I think they're looking at some of their own personal aesthetics and they're thinking, gosh, it would be so nice to come home and know without a shadow of a doubt that the person I'm living with really loves me. I would love to see, that I have children and that they're growing and that, I can watch and see what they're going to do with their lives. I want, to have that moment where, I finally got that perfectly it is, and just saying that there's an appreciation for kind of these simple pleasures of life. So this is a call, even if it's only unconscious for some people, for the return of the domestic goddess. There is a hunger for this, and so we don't have to feel ashamed in any way, shape, or form if we are sensing ourselves being pulled towards answering that call. All right, so I would also like to say that good housekeeping is not strictly about the aesthetics, and it is not restricted to one particular aesthetics. I picked up these images from Pinterest, and they represent different kinds. I've got a cottagecore looking thing, I've got dark academia, I've got something a bit more modern, I've got Victorian over there. But no matter what kind of surroundings you like to have, you can have a good home life and good housekeeping. So don't feel like this is just that things have to look a particular way. Because I know another thing that really seems to be big is that whole 1950s aesthetic, which, if that's what you love, absolutely. Knock yourself out, have fun with it. There's no reason why you shouldn't. But if that isn't really your jam, don't feel like that you can't have this, soul of domesticity if you aren't drawn towards that particular aesthetic, because you do not have to. Because good housekeeping is about function, not form. So minimalist, maximalist, it doesn't matter. You can have good housekeeping either way. Same with whether you favor furnishings that are simple or ornate, whether you like neutral color schemes or very colorful color schemes. You could be a traditionalist, you could be a modernist, you could be in a tiny space, you could be in large space. All of these things don't matter. What matter is the household actually functioning. That's what's going to make the difference between good housekeeping and bad. Now, because all of us are, I think, a little bit lost in the woods, at least to a certain extent, I did want to bring up 3 books that I regularly turn to for guidance on this. First, there's Home Comforts by Cheryl Mendelson. I think it was published in the late 90s, but fact check me on that. The reason I really like her is because it's a big, thick book. It answers a lot of questions about, okay, how do I launder this? What kind of cleaner should I use? What's safe for this material? All these other sorts of things. And it's done in this very organized and cohesive fashion. And, she's not beating up anyone. She's not telling anyone that they have to meet a one particular standard or anything else. She's just saying, get your house in order. Here are some ideas. You can use them. And then there's Social Graces by, let's see, it's Ann Platts and Susan Wales. Yeah, that's who it is. Oh, I'm sorry. My presentation is tiny to my old eyes. But this is actually a modern day etiquette book. Another good source for etiquette information would be the Judith Martin books. She used to do the Miss Manners columns for the Washington Post back in the day. But the reason why I like to excite people's interest in that particular book is just because societies do benefit from having a common etiquette and having a kind of this unspoken language of behavior with which people deal with each other and know what the range of normal behavior is that has been actively destroyed by both the boomers and Gen X. And I think we need a little bit of a resurgence of that if we're going to figure out how to actually exist in the world together. So there's that. And then last but not at all least, it is a book, The House Witch by Aaron Murcock. This book, I refer to it often, especially when I'm needing to just recenter my practice, because it's a very practical kitchen table kind of approach, not only to witchcraft, but also to having witchcraft and magical practices centered on the home life. So these books really work together for me. So I think they're well worth anyone's time and attention. So a few quotes from some of these books to give you a sense of why I do appreciate them. The first is from The Art and Science of Keeping Home. Being perceived as excessively domestic can get you socially ostracized. When I finally began disclosing to friends and acquaintances just what the long book was about that I had been working on for so many years, I got a lot of stares. Many times my courage failed me when painful silences followed my confession. No, not a history of housework, an explanation of it. A practical book on how you can make the bed and make a comfortable home. Now, you would think that wouldn't be considered radical or anything that would get you in trouble with your acquaintance, but it does. And I think anyone who is naturally inclined towards domestic pursuits, they've probably had at least one instance in their life where this was the reception they got. And of course, that's not particularly fun, but that's what it is. You can't control how people react. But the way they react, it should not deter you from the value of what you're doing. Another quote from the book: housekeeping creates cleanliness, order, regularity, beauty, and the conditions for health and safety, and a good place to do and feel all the things you wish and need to do and feel in your home. It is your housekeeping that makes your home alive, that turns it into a small society in its own right, a vital place with its own ways and rhythms, the place where you can be more yourself than you can be anywhere else. Now, doesn't that sound nice? Amidst council culture and people having the nastiest receptions to, even the smallest of honest opinions, isn't it nice to have the idea that we can create a home where we can simply be ourselves, let our hair down, we can relax, we can say what we actually think, mean everything that we say, and that it's not going to result in some kind of social calamity or professional calamity, as the cancel culture often does for people. There's a reason why that unconscious pull towards let's have home life again is being manifested in many people. And a final quote from Home Comforts is, what a traditional woman did that made her home alive was not dusting and laundry. Her real secret was that she identified herself with her home. Her affection was in the soft sofa cushions, clean linens, and good meals. Her memory in the well stocked storeroom cabinets and the pantry. Her intelligence in the order and helpfulness of her home, her good humor in its light and air. She lived her life not only through her own body, but through the house as an extension of her body. Part of her relation to those she loved was embodied in the, let's see where to go. Ugh. But essentially, it was embodied in the way that she kept house. Sorry, there's the slideshow on my end. There's a little thing that's blocking what I can see. Anyway, but I think it does make the point. It makes the point that this is an extension of who you are, an expression of who you are. And this is another way where you are really making your influence and power felt in the universe. This is your own private world. And to a certain extent, everyone else is just in it, which is, again, why people need to learn to use their powers with wisdom rather than as a way to just micromanage people. That is a very important thing, but it's a reflection of the woman herself when she's actually invested into it. And that's why I do have issues with people who just follow trends or do things just for the aesthetic, because if that is not expression of who you are, or if you're doing it to get approval from some sort of external source, it never really rings quite true. Something just always feels off, and that's pretty off-putting. But it doesn't have to be that way, especially if we go into this kind of pursuit with more intention. Next, from Social Graces. Amidst all the advances and miracles of the modern age, we tend to lose sight of each other. In the last century especially, our focus has communally shifted to the experience and needs of the individual. From fast food drive-thrus and pay-at-the-pump gas stations all the way to automatic cash machines, we have worked increasingly hard to limit our interactions with each other. It's no wonder that we have lost sight how to behave and how to treat one another. Now, this was published, I think, in the early 2000s-ish. Again, fact check me on that. And just think of all of the technological advances we have had since that time that have made it even more possible to have as little human contact as what is technologically possible. And is anyone actually better off for it? Is it really a coincidence that we have seen this rise in social anxiety and people being generally hateful to each other, people being very entitled, because technology has had us, given us this lifestyle that can be very tailored to all of our little whims with no thought about how any of this affects anybody else. And the result has been, increased discord amongst human beings. They knew it back then, and it's even more true now. They go on to write in their book, both Anne and I were single mothers during the season of our lives where duties were overwhelming. Therefore, we have great empathy for those who do the best they can with what they have. Sometimes just providing for your family is all a mother, father, or grandparents can do. Social Graces is dedicated to all of you and is our special gift to you. Now you have Anne and Susan in your lives. Just refer to us as your Aunt Grace. As you study this book, consider how you can apply these principles in your life. We can assure you that you will live life more abundantly and that you will make the world a better place. And that is a very good justification for why utilizing a little bit more etiquette is all going to be all the better. But they're also talking about having more reasonable expectations. If you are working a full-time job and maybe a side job and you've got kids to tend to and older parents and all these other things, you are not going to be operating at a level of superlative excellence. However, by learning more etiquette and by putting in workable routines in the home, you can live at a higher standard and with more grace and dignity than you would otherwise if you just surrender to the chaos. Last quote from Social Graces that I want to give you is, by practicing correct etiquette at home, it will soon become a natural part of your lifestyles. Good manners will put you at ease in a variety of social situations. Being relaxed allows you to sparkle in the social setting and to laugh and to those who surround stop the anxiety before it starts. Now, doesn't that sound much nicer than taking various pills to overcome these psychiatric disorders that are in large part an extension and consequences of us never having been really civilized, of not being told that there are certain standards of behavior, by not being taught how to properly deal with other people and saying, oh, well, all social interaction is really just optional. Well, no, it really isn't. It really isn't. And so this is something that I think can help alleviate a lot of that doesn't require us messing around with chemicals and our own personal body chemistry with, other unintended side effects. It just seems like it's a little bit easier to apply common etiquette, or at least I suppose in our course to more properly say to restore a common etiquette and deal with people on that basis. Just a thought. Not everything can be solved with a pill. Now, for the house witch. The first quote I want to give you is: the role of the house witch is to serve as a facilitator for the spiritual well being of herself, her family, and her welcome guests. Her home is her temple, which she tends in order to keep energy flowing smoothly and freely, as well as to honor the principles she upholds. She seeks to support and nurture her family and extended community in both a spiritual and physical fashion. Now, this is where the rubber is really hitting the road when it comes to combining and integrating our mundane life and our spirituality, particularly for those of us who practice the craft. I mean, if we don't do that, we're driving ourselves to a place of complete and total insanity. Integration really is the way forward, and realizing that we can bring these things together and kill two birds with one stone, take care of two things at one time, and that is only going to benefit us going forward. Next, the book says, here are some keywords to keep in mind when you think about hearthcraft, and you'll see why I brought this to your attention. Simple, practical, family-related, domestic, everyday, household. This is not about having particularly ostentatious or elaborate rituals. This is not about doing things the hard way, making things difficult. This is about things you can sustain on a daily basis. And that kind of sustainability without being driven to madness, without being driven to exhaustion, sounds pretty good to me. And then she goes on to say, a house is a neutral structure, and a home is a living, thriving place that is created by the actions and intentions of the people who live within that house. The home is a sanctuary, a place of security. It is defined by the people who live in it, is created by them, and is keyed to their energy. Energy defines the home in more than one way. It feeds and propels it spiritually and emotionally, but it is also invested in the form of money that sets it up and maintains it. So you see, again, it's all interrelated. Everything all works together. The mundane efforts, the spiritual applications of it, it is all one, and it is key to your family's particular energy. And a lot of times when people say, oh, I think there's something oogie boogie in my house, something feels off, something feels right, I'm like, well, maybe if you reorganize your pantry and you get your house cleaned up in order, maybe if you deal with some family messes, then take a gander at your energy. Is energy has the oogie boogie sensation faded away? Is it still there? Because if it's still there and you actually do you have your house in order, maybe then there is some cause to be concerned. But if it is alleviated, then that wasn't coming from an oogie boogie. That was just the dysfunction of your household, and you were picking up on it energetically. So keep that in mind. Now, we do have allies in this, and I want to stress that just in case anyone who's been watching through this, which if you've been watching the whole way through, thank you very much. That's much appreciated. You are not on your own with this. You do not have to feel like you're just this lone reed in the universe getting tossed about, and the only person who cares about the home is you. No, 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 no. We have a variety of goddesses, gods, house spirits, your ancestors, and of course, even members of your own household. Now, for your goddesses, we have some obvious ones: Hestia, Vesta, Juno, Hera, Frigga, Sigyn, Bercha, Brigid, Caradwyn, the Caliac, Bastet. And the gods, Lu, surprisingly Loki, Thor, Njord, Hermes, Bes. And your house spirits, depending on your cultural background, you might call them brownies, domovoi, lares, penetrates, but essentially these are the other unseen inhabitants and helpers of the home. And of course, your ancestors. In all probability, you have some ancestor who is absolutely famed for their domestic skills or just their ability to keep the family together, which of course is always, that is a manifestation of good housekeeping by having a united family, or just who, had some kind of special skill. Her pumpkin pie at Thanksgiving was far better than anyone else's pumpkin pie ever. That was just something that great Aunt Matilda could do. You can draw upon your ancestors. You can call upon them saying, give me nudges in the right direction. I need your guidance. I need your wisdom. I want to create for my family something of what you created for your own and what I inherited from you. They will help you. You just have to ask and be persistent, and to, make yourself aware for any little nudges you might get. And then the pesky members of your household, you can draft them into service. And I realize that children may not want to, but you know what? Childhood isn't about getting your own way. And I think there's a great deal of benefits for children to be derived if they learn that they have certain requirements and that contributing to the household, that isn't just something that the adults are required to do. And that part of the purpose of their childhood is for them to learn how to grow into adult responsibilities. And it can start small. Simply, making the bed, picking up their toys. Yes, you will have to remind them, you'll have to nag. And, of course, it won't necessarily be done to your satisfaction, but if you can learn to give them E for effort and encourage them to continue growing up and to kind of turn this into a fun thing, like, oh, you did such a good job. Now, do you want to do this fun project with me? If you learn to reward that behavior, not only do they become much more willing to be of assistance, they tend to have a little bit better of an attitude about it, and they won't be fighting you as much every step of the way. Now, if you're starting this when the kids are teenagers, the very best of luck to you. I have no idea how to deal with this. It is easier to start when children are small, but I suppose you could always appeal to the teenager's sense of, I don't want to say self-preservation because that isn't quite right, but their sense of, look, in a very few short years, you're going to be wanting to have your own home. You're going to be wanting to have things done. Don't you want to have some idea of what it is you want and how you want your home to be before you get there? Wouldn't that be kind of nice to go in with a plan? They might listen, they may not. They may listen and not actually let you know that you're listening, but at least the information will be where it needs to be. So, moving on. I do believe that all these things do begin with a routine. I have this little example of a housekeeping schedule. There's all kinds of them on Pinterest, and they're tailored for people of very different lifestyles. You can probably find something that's at least a good starting point for you. And of course, in addition to having, this mundane housekeeping schedule that you can adapt for your own family, as a pagan, and if you're a witch, you can also make use of the magical characteristics of each day to really customize what you're doing, when you're doing it, the manner in which you're doing it. And of course, in this matter, practicality has to rule over everything. If what you're trying to do isn't practical, if it isn't actually workable for you, it's not going to happen. It will not happen. It doesn't matter how hard you try. If it is simply not practical for your circumstances, it will fail. So when you get the idea that perhaps the tail is wagging the dog, make adjustments to where the dog is wagging the tail again. That's all. So, daily living. I firmly believe you will feel more sane and more in control if you just do a few common things. Just you make your bed daily, tidy up the common areas of the house. I'm not talking about getting out the dusters and the vacuum and everything else. Just, straighten the pillows, fold the blankets, tidy up that stack of magazines, whatever, kind of the hustle and bustle of your house is, just turn it into an orderly state. You will feel better the next morning. Make sure you do the dishes or that you load the dishwasher. So when you wake up in the morning, you don't see a disaster area of a kitchen. It can be clean, and that's easier to ease into the day, especially if you are not a morning person. And also another simple thing that does not take time, just put your dirty clothes in the hamper, not on the floor. And yes, I realize sometimes it is our spouses who are the chief obstacles towards this. Try bribery. Sometimes if you say, I'll make your favorite cookies, or, that dinner that you really, really love, I'll do that for you if you would just get your clothes in the hamper consistently. Bribery can be a very powerful motivator. And of course, also just pay your respects to your house brownie or however you visualize that spirit with a small little offering. And I do mean small, just a little bit of honey in a designated container, or, I often make them a cup of tea, just something small, something sustainable that just is a way of saying thank you without actually saying the words thank you, because, we are dealing with a kind of a form of fae, and that's not how they like to have gratitude expressed. But by giving them something that shows your esteem, that acknowledges their presence, and that also demonstrates appreciation for the efforts that they do, the things that they may do that we may never consciously see or be aware of, but nevertheless are contributing to having a well-run household, that can go a long way. These are simple things. These are things that altogether probably would not take up 30 minutes of your time. So it's not a huge investment. Now, let's begin with Sundays. Sundays, of course, are ruled by the glorious sun. That is a very masculine projective energy. So this is a day to honor the solar deities, to make use of the fire element, and also remember the keywords of sovereignty, health, purification, happiness, taking charge, doing what's right for your well-being, and making everything all sparkly again. So Sundays are a pretty good day for having a full-out house cleaning, or at least a house refreshing, doing preparation for the week, whether it's meals, something you need to do for work, the kids' school, any rituals you have coming up in that week. It's also a good time to have a nice, proper Sunday dinner. I think that would be a beautiful tradition to really bring back. Now, it hasn't died out completely depending on what area of the country you're in or what kind of family you have. But I think this is a good thing to bring back if that hasn't really been part of your existence. Just a nice sit down Sunday dinner, eat to, 1 o'clock, do the whole thing, set the table, make it nice, make it a nice occasion. That can be a good thing to do. And of course, with all of this good energy, it's also a good day to do some pretty hyperactive exercise. So there is that. That's one way to organize your Sundays. And I do think that if you just have certain tasks assigned to certain days, that can also take any sensation of being overwhelmed out of it. So next, Mondays, ruled by the moon, of course. That's a very feminine, receptive energy. So honor your lunar deities, work with the water element, and think about magic, dreaming, spirituality, and introspection. Now, because of the linkage with Mondays and dream work, tidy your bedroom, make sure it's all nice and comfortable. Maybe put a little lavender sachet or a dreaming sachet underneath it if you're wanting to do some dream work. Also a good day to do some laundry if needed, clean over those glass surfaces, and also to meditate. That can be a very good thing to get into the habit of doing right before bed. But if you make a special effort on Mondays to meditate, I think that heightens the energy, and that also helps sustain you throughout the coming week, so you can continue taking care of your other mundane responsibilities relating to the housework. So you see, already we have spirituality and mundane action working together. Now, Tuesdays, ruled by Mars, having a masculine and a projective energy. This is a time to honor deities of war and rulership. And if you are at war within yourself about doing this, if you are feeling the need that you need to conquer, to overcome bad habits so that you can form healthier ones, these deities might have greater wisdom than you might imagine to do that. Another good day to work with the fire element and just think challenges, conflict, negotiation, strategy. So anything that you need to attack. And this is why I put some of the household chores that aren't particularly pleasant onto the Tuesday, because you're kind of going in with that, I'm going to get it, I will take the hill and I will conquer the hill. And sometimes that's very helpful if you're having to do something like clean the bathrooms, or you're doing a full emptying of the litter box, changing out the litter, changing puppy pads, things of that sort. Also for paying bills, and giving yourself a good pep talk if you need it, just to give yourself that confidence boost. Because sometimes you just need that extra surge of aggression to say, yes, I'm going to be propelled forward and I can do this and I shall conquer. Make use of the energy of the days of the week, and you'll be surprised how it can change your life. Now for Wednesdays, ruled by the planet Mercury, of course. So again, this is masculine projective energy, working with deities who are linked with communication. This is also a good time for that, but also for working with the air element. So think about organizing, traveling, exchanges, prophecy. I think this is a good time to kind of dust and clean the floors, because it makes everything fresh, everything clear. You kind of know where everything is. I think that also helps clear the air for better communication. This is a good time to do your accounts, deal with any household paperwork, but also to reach out to relatives or friends that you haven't spoken with for a little while. Or maybe if you need to have a more serious family discussion, this would be a good time to do it, because Wednesdays are about communication. You can work with that energy again. And of course, divination. There's nothing saying that, you can't do divination about, is there something I need to keep in mind for the coming week? Or, my teenager seems to be going through this weird little phase. I could use a little bit of nudges from the wisdom of the universe and the gods to help understand how I can be supportive and to provide them with good guidance during that phase. There's all sorts of reasons why you might choose to do divination relating to household matters. Now, for Thursdays, they are ruled by Jupiter. This has a feminine and a receptive energy. So you might think about focusing upon deities relating to specifically to hearth and home, working with the earth element, and be practical. Think about honor, prosperity, well-being. I think this is an excellent day to give the kitchen a really good, thorough going over, to restock your pantry as you need, maybe turn your attention to your garden, and of course, make a magical meal. It can be a little bit overwhelming to go from, never really doing magical cooking to trying to do it every single night. So if you want to get into that and you just want to do it one night a week to start with, just to kind of get into the routine, choose Thursdays as your day. The energy is correct for it. Everything's going together. You can infuse a lot of magical intention. And of course, if witches will have a bit of an advantage with this, but even if you aren't a magical practitioner, if you are aware of the magical correspondences of the ingredients of the meals you're preparing, you are at least bringing that energy into it and into the household in an ambient way. It will be there, even if it's not consciously and deliberately channeled and directed the way a witch would do. So don't think that that's a completely cut off to you. It's just not going to have as pronounced as an effect, but it won't be without effect. Now, for Fridays, ruled by the planet Venus. This is a feminine receptive energy. You can reach out to deities related to love and to romance. Also work with earth, fire, and water elements. I think happiness, friendship, love, and fertility. This is a good day for cleaning the living and the dining room. These are shared communal spaces. It goes with that idea of welcoming people into your life and having them be comfortable. I think this is also a good day to attend the houseplants because they are kind of the silent sufferers of many a household, clinging to life as someone desperately tries to nurture the houseplant so it doesn't die. But this is also a good time to make a dessert, celebrate the end of the week, to kind of make the most of the sweetness of the Friday energy. But also this could be a good time to make time for your sweetie. This is part of good housekeeping as well, maintaining your family relationships. And of course, you're not going to have much of a family relationship if you are neglecting your spouse. So make time for them. Now for Saturdays, ruled by Saturn, of course. This is, again, a masculine projective energy, and working with deities who have to do with magic and time. This is the ideal moment for that. Work with all of the elements if you want to. This is about magical practices, establishing self-discipline, gaining wisdom, and gaining a sense of peace. So if you can possibly use this as a time to rest and relax, go spend time with your family, go exploring, set time aside for worship, because all of the energies are, more likely to be oriented towards looking towards the divine. So this is a good time if let's say you just want to do kind of a weekly ritual to kind of touch base with your spirituality. Saturdays might be a very good time for you to do that. Now, monthly tasks. Certainly, I would suggest doing spiritual magical cleansings of the home with the new moon, whether you are a witch or not, and to renew spiritual and magical protections of the home with the full moon, when energy is at its peak and things are coming into manifestation. But more mundanely, clean the fence, check batteries on various alarms, clean the appliances, thoroughly tidy up your garden, clean out your closets, organize them. You do this on the monthly basis. Not only do the chores go more quickly, but it prevents them from getting into a state of complete despair. This is all about, making your life less hard. And so even though you're doing a lot more things with the household more frequently, it's taking up less of your time, it's taking up less of your energy, and it's taking up less of your mental state. And of course, the more you get into a routine, the more it just kind of becomes this reflex and you do it automatically. And making a list helps, knowing what you're doing and when you're doing it. Then we have our seasonal shifts to consider. Switching out seasonal decor, floral arrangements to better flow with what's going on during the year. I do this every single month. I make a little adjustments, and I try to keep my faux floral arrangements at least reflecting what's going on in nature, with the exceptions being in September and March, because damn it, I will shame the weather and actually like spring and fall during those months, regardless of what's happening. Sometimes you do just have to set the weather a good example. But also with our other seasonal tasks is preparing for pagan holidays. If we put in a little more preparation into our celebrations and our rituals, we get a lot more out of them. We just have to invest all that energy. Freshen the home appropriately for each season. I think doing kind of a spring cleaning 4 times a year, I think that goes a long way towards keeping your house completely under control, and also for you to being aware of what kind of maintenance your home is really requiring, because things do crop up. But if you kind of have your pulse on what's going on with your home, it's easier to attend to those things early so they don't become a big deal. Also, seasonally, affirm your relationship with the spirits of the land. Even if you are in a city, even if you are in an apartment, 100 feet off the ground, you are still residing on that land. And even though it may be very difficult to hear, um, I don't want to say hear the voices, but to feel the influence of the spirits of the land, they are still there. You can still nurture that connection. You can still make that a viable thing, but you do have to put the effort into it. And of course, seasonally, you tend to vehicle needs, home repairs, all that stuff, as we mentioned. So, a few little helpful hints. Just first of all, keep in mind all of this has been a suggestion. This is a starting point to help you brainstorm about what's going to be appropriate for you and to help you realize that you actually can have a better run household and you can get some of these benefits. And you have absolute freedom to make adjustments as appropriate, especially depending upon your work schedule. A lot of what I outlined, that was based on the idea that someone's working more or less 9 to 5 and they have a fairly stable schedule. But a lot of people, especially if they're in retail or if they work in factories, their schedules can be absolutely all over the place. And there's only so much you can do to eliminate that kind of chaos from your employment. But if you do have a little bit more consistency at home, that does help you sustain your lifestyle and to feel less frazzled. And of course, don't beat yourself up if one particular approach to housekeeping doesn't work for you. You've eliminated a possibility, and once you've eliminated that from your mind, that is opening the door for you to find something that will work for you, and that brings you closer to regaining household sanity. That's worth a great deal. Don't underestimate that. And of course, the more your spiritual life and your daily life are aligned, the easier it is to practice both, the less it feels burdensome to try to attend to both, because this is just an extension of who you are. It's what you do. It's that automatic reflex. We've talked in witchcraft circles for a long time about how the craft is a way of life. And yes, it is. But it doesn't start out as a way of life. That's something that has to be gradually integrated in. And I think to an extent that also holds true for a pagan lifestyle. These are things that we gradually cultivate over time. And I think perhaps the easiest way to do that and to make that process and push it along is by just working with the energy of every day of the week, working with the sea things seasonally, and just bringing everything into closer and closer alignment until you're not having to think about it. You're not having to, look for, a live stream like this trying to give you some ideas, because you already know who you are. You know what's working for you. You can see where adjustments needs to be made, and it's manageable. And that's really the point at which your home does become that oasis against all of the insanity of the world. And you do have that stronghold to where you are able to deal with challenges that arise from external sources, to where you can combat some of the insane messaging that we get from all quarters these days. And it's also a way and to push back against the things that you don't like in the world by practicing the things that you do. So hopefully you found this useful. If you have, please let me know in the comments, or if you would like to reach out to me at Brigantia Blackbird at protonmail.com, I'd be happy to talk with you there. I am getting better about checking my emails. I do check on them at least once a day. So you can definitely get a hold of me there, especially if you're wanting to get a little bit more in depth, or if you're saying, yeah, I could just use someone to help me brainstorm. I can help with you at least for that a little bit. And even if you reject everything I have to say, well, again, you've eliminated a possibility that won't work for you, and that brings you closer to what will. So it's a win-win all the way around. So apart from that, thank you ever so much for tuning in. If you like this, please leave a like. Leave a comment, as I said, and please don't be bashful about sharing these streams. The more people who view this kind of content and to see that pagans and witches are normal people just trying to live good lives, the more that will break down prejudice against us, and the more we can actually help a lot of our brothers and sisters who may be struggling. So be a friend, share things around, and I guess that's it, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye-bye.